heat is still on.
Massive game.
New Zealand a win.
Great fit.
It's been a terrible year for the Wallabies.
We're missing an injection of life.
Stupid guys think they're so good.
Hello and welcome to RuggaMatrix International. I'm your host, Juro Sen. This is episode 243, and as always, Ben Kimber is my co-host. G'day, Benny.
G'day, Juro. How are you, mate?
Yeah, good. I'm driving the new console. I have a new Mac
Very
in
sharp.
the background, so I'm trying out that at the moment, but let's not mess around. Don't forget, the after show, join us for that at the completion of our half-hour program, because we'll go through all your comments that have been online during the week and during the show. But for now, let's cross to Ben Kimber for Ben's strike issue of the week.
Strike issue of the week, mate. After some excellent rugby on the weekend, some not so excellent rugby on the weekend, always plenty to talk about. In this situation, though, I thought the first test, All Blacks Lions, we've got to talk about that. That's got to be our strike issue of the week. And the issue is, after, I wouldn't say a comfortable victory by NZ, but it was a clear victory. It is, do the Lions have another gear? We were all anticipating that first test so much. We wanted to see a big game. We saw a big game. But in the end, a late consolation try to the Lions made it a bit more respectable. But it was a clear win to NZ. So can the Lions step up for Test 2 is my issue of the week.
All right. I definitely think the Lions have another gear, Benny. But the big question to answer that question is, do the All Blacks have another gear? Absolutely they do. So whatever the Lions do in stepping up in quality for the second test, the All Blacks will certainly do, and especially their captain Courageous, who came out and had a cracker in Kieran Reid.
He did. He had a big game. And as you guys know, I've been questioning whether Reid's going to have the longevity, whether he's going to find his form again. Well, he certainly put one to me on the weekend with 70-odd minutes, came back and was
Kieran.
right in the middle of a top test match. So a couple of moments of brilliance, that little pass off the scrum, which I thought was fine. I didn't think the TMO got that one wrong. I think was it Georgie Ayoub might have called that one. I thought that was fine. But Reid had a big game. I wouldn't say he was one of the best on the park, but for the context of that game, coming back as captain after very little rugby and playing against a fired-up Lions team for that period of game as captain, that was massive.
All right, so I think to your strike issue of the week, the big question is, how do you find the next gear? You can't increase fitness that much in a week. We'll talk about fitness later on.
Fitness is going to be a topic, everybody.
Yes, it is. But what do you improve in that short space of time? Because there's not much time to turn things around. But you do get to focus on things you do wrong. And I think there are very little things that I think the All Blacks did wrong. But what can you improve on if you're the Lions?
Well, I think what I saw on the weekend was a game that probably played out the way that Hansen saw it playing out, more so than Gatland, clearly. Now, there's a strength to this longer tour they've brought in. They've had to bring a team together. They had a loss. They've had a couple of better games. They've brought a style together. But I think the All Blacks knew what was coming. You could see the team that was picked. You could see what they were about. And it was down more to execution and energy for the Lions than game plan. The Conor Murray box kick, the rush defence, all of those things the All Blacks were ready for and tactically adjusted to. So, bit deeper in the play, took on the defensive line very differently around the rucks. And apart from, I think, struggling with that box kick originally on a slippery night, there were a few too many drop balls. The All Blacks adjusted their game tactically to take the Lions on in a much better fashion.
All right, so I think that the Lions do have another gear in them. There's no doubt about that, because they've only just come together. The All Blacks obviously been playing for a fair while together, even though they've had a bit of a break. But they are getting better. I expect tactically a better test match from them. I think there's not probably too much we can go on about them getting a gear without getting into the match itself, Benny. But I think the Lions have got more in them. But to their big issue, the All Blacks have as well.
Yeah, look, we will have to see, I think, some changes in the Lions, in the pack, most likely. The pack didn't get where they wanted it to be. Alan Wynne-Jones looked like he struggled with the pace a bit, which was a bit of a concern. Some of the guys went well. Sean O'Brien didn't have the impact you would have thought, and he's had some massive games. So there are guys who'll expect to do better, and there are guys that might get replaced.
All right, Benny. So they had a great opportunity to light the game up from the first minute, basically, and didn't quite score the try. But the try they did score, have you seen a better try than that? It was sensational.
You could watch that all day. Yeah. What a fantastic try. When you start,
Sean O'Brien with the finishing touches too.
In a few years from now, we'll talk about the try as one of those great examples of end-to-end rugby. Williams off the right foot around Reid, runs around Cruden, sets Davies off downfield. Daly gets involved, O'Brien over. That was sensational. Really, really enjoyed that try. And that would have or should have given the Lions more impetus.
Well, it shows me they want to play rugby.
Yeah.
They want to play rugby, and they have the capability, but that little finesse isn't there.
Well, they want to play rugby, but it is also fair to say that they wouldn't have based a game on the counter-attack. I think it was good selection from Gatland. He put Williams in there, he put Daly in there, he put Watson in there. He was looking for a sharp back three, so counter-attack was part of it, but it was the other parts of the game that probably didn't work as well for them. The Conor Murray box kick was too much of what they relied on that too much. So all of a sudden, I didn't see the game from Murray that I've seen in other games where he mixes it up.
Well,
Bit of a running game, you know, we didn't quite see him mix it up. There was too much of that box kick and then thinking about running the ball back through Williams possibly.
Well, you know what I think about box kicks. You've really got to know what you're doing, and you have to have the team to back it up. South Africa have actually been doing it really well. We'll talk about them later on, but I actually like the way they use the box kick in their series against France.
I don't have a problem with the box kick at the right time and executed well, because all of a sudden you can be
but that's why I have a problem, mate. Because
it's not executed well.
Like in Australian rugby, it gets used, and Australians can't kick the bloody ball.
Well, it's charged down half the time.
So don't do it.
Yeah, well, but when you do it right, as Conor Murray does, it's a great tool because you can be, you know, middling around in your own 30 or thereabouts, and all of a sudden you're putting pressure on them on the ball inside their half. And he is great at the box kick, just quietly. Is there a better exponent?
No. He's pretty damn good. Mind you, they've got plenty of backup there at scrum half, and you know, they finished the game nicely too with a try. But I think in the end, it was a really good test match. And, you know, the Lions were in there. I talked about how they had to hang in there for a fair while in the game.
Well, it's 13 out at half time that have taken that. That have said, we'll take that and we'll look to come home better. The All Blacks, though, their scrum, clearly on top. Points decision to the Lions in the line-outs. But the AB scrum, you know, particularly for Ioane's first try, the Lions will be looking at that for sure. You'd think the British-Irish guys had come down here expecting to have a strong or dominant scrum. Not the case, and that was fairly costly for them.
That's because when they kick, they chase well.
Yeah,
the All Blacks, and there's a few times that it didn't happen in other Test matches around the world. But they know when they can sniff it out. That's the big thing.
Now, the guys, I want to talk about the guys who went well. For those who are on our Facebook page, straight after the game, I posted Retalic's name. I thought he was man of the match. I thought he was outstanding in the rough stuff.
Massive.
Wide in defence, he had an enormous game, and I thought that was fantastic. Whitelock a little bit quieter than that, but really no bad players in that All Blacks 8. Reid we talked about, and the other thing I posted before the game was very keen to see. And prior to the first test, I'd been tipping the All Blacks, but not with by a massive margin. When I saw Hanson's team, and I saw that he picked Ioane on the wing over Sevilla, the bus, and the bus wasn't even in the 23. That was massive to me. That said, this team is focused on change. It's focused on picking the right people. Hanson does have his favourites, but that was an enormous call, and I think the right call. I think Ioane is going to be one of those guys we are talking about as a legend of the game in 10 years. I think up there with, maybe not Jonah Loma, who's on a pedestal, but up there with some of the best. I think his speed, skill, I think he's got it, and I think he's a guy that you should be frightened of in international rugby. Yeah,
absolutely. See Big Maxie's having trouble seeing us live. It's going out perfectly. We've got a massive stream up, so...
check your provider, Maxie.
It's at the other end, I'm sorry. It is going up beautifully on my Nighthawk. I'll have to get the modem. There's no other way of doing it. Thanks to the NBN.
Now, some of the Lions guys who I want to talk about, you know, speaking of inspired selection, which I thought Ioane was, I thought Williams was a great pick at the back, and aside from that bit where he let Ioane through for that try, which probably put the game out of reach, Williams had a very good game and wanted to chance his arm and brought that confidence to the Lions pack. Davies looked good at 13. Faletau in defence was pretty big, but essentially that tight 5 I think was where they got beaten a lot, not just in the scrum but around the pack. And that's going to be something they look at. Whether they need a bit more energy, I think Itoji's going to come into the pack. I think Courtney Laws could come into play because they need those guys who are going to rip in.
Steve Hansen the next morning was very keen to drive home the point that the All Black tight 5 was where they want it. He is so adamant on giving the praise to the tight 5 because it's sort of, I can tell it annoys him that he thinks that the All Blacks just get credit for throwing the ball around, but it's that hard work that the tight 5 do that they don't get credit for that sets up a lot of these victories. And we know you got to win up front before you win everywhere else. sometimes you don't have to do that if you can play the game in a certain speedy way. But I agree with Hansen. He's absolutely spot on. And I thought, how well are the coaches in this epic theatre? The way they've been treating each other. There's been a few barbs, but today's stuff, or Sunday's stuff post the game, was really impressive. And Hansen's has had nothing but praise for the opposition.
We had a bit of that today, though. Last 24 hours, we've had a little bit.
Oh no, well, we'll say nothing, but great praise for the opposition.
Yeah, and rightly so, right?
And so you should. Mate, the hardest job is to actually bring these guys together and make them into a unit that's unified. Yeah. It's easy to do one country. So it is, you've got all that talent, but how do you focus it and use that talent in the right way and pick the right guys?
Yeah.
And do you go for the combination? So,
And that's it. And we've talked before, and we'll talk about the Wallabies a bit later in the show, but that we think Cheika loses games at the selection table. Yeah. I thought both Gatlin and Hansen went well at the selection table, though the tight five is where Gatlin will look next.
100%.
But even so, also, the selections during the game, Teo got taken off. I don't think he should have. He was one of the guys who, it's straight running and hard running, but he was monstrous. Smashing SBW, hitting the line hard and making the All Blacks think a bit more. So that was an interesting one, and they didn't quite adjust to that. And then the combos between Murray and Farrell, and that Farrell didn't have an enormously great game. So a couple of those guys, you'll get tapped on the shoulder and say, you need to lift. Other guys will get switched out for those lines.
Yeah, Farrell. God, he copped a massive hit during the game too. Yeah. So he really knew he was in a contest, and the physicality the All Blacks brought to the game was extraordinary as well. So that was fantastic to watch. What did you think of heading into the second half? Did you possibly think the Lions were a chance?
I was reasonably confident the All Blacks would win that, but I was pleasantly surprised, and I loved it. Right, it was the energy was fantastic in that game, except for the fact that I don't know about the rest of you guys. Over the TV, I didn't get a feeling that the crowd was a major factor in the game. So if you were at the game, let us know, because I didn't get the feeling that the energy, the crowd was the way it felt for me back in the when the Lions toured Australia and you got to sit in that crowd. So perhaps it just didn't translate. But heading into that second half,
I reckon that's the case.
You had to think that the Lions, they're in this, and they were, because that amazing try, it showed them that they can do more than everyone said, and they were 5 points back, only 5 points. Also, trouble in the All Blacks camp. Then on the other side of half time, Smith, Crotty, both injured. Now Smith's a real concern. That concussion, that can be, something that they're going to think is the next 20 years, 30 years from me, am I going to be affected? They've got to keep an eye on Smith. He was a loss, but kudos to the All Blacks. They adjusted. Barrett went back. Cruden didn't have an enormously good game in at 5'8" in comparison. But tell you what, Barrett's goal kicking, he cops a lot of crap about that. Farrell was the one who blinked on the night.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was a good test. I think it actually went the way I thought it'd go. They put in a good effort, the Lions, but in the end they were beaten by a far superior team. Yeah. Let's talk about Kieran Reid. Kieran Reid, you mentioned before, you didn't think he was the best player in the field. Can I say, a guy who's been out as long as he's been out, and to perform the way he did to lead his country was a phenomenal effort. Still a great effort, because you can't mark him the way you mark the other players. I think he came in and played an amazing game, and the All Black staff, to get him ready, deserve massive credit for that. What do you think?
Absolutely, and I think I said that at the top of the show. Kieran Reid, as you know, I'm questioning his longevity. How long I can't see him go to 2019. He can prove me wrong on that as well. But for that game, we're going to talk about fitness with the Wallabies. Lack of match fitness, coming straight back in against a side with the kind of back row that the Lions have, who I rate: O'Brien, Omani, Falatau. Yep. And he was in a lot. I said he wasn't the best player in the park, but from where he came from and the effort he put in, that was phenomenal. Yeah,
and I think what he did sort of inspired the guys around him. Phenomenal effort. Great thing for New Zealand. So have you got much more on that?
A couple more to touch on. I thought, we've seen a couple of barbs go back and forth with Gatlin and Hansen afterwards. Gatlin called out, diving at Conor Murray's legs. I didn't think there was a lot in that. I didn't see a lot in that. I don't want to talk about too much about it. Hansen came back and said he's under pressure. I thought it was a bit of a weak slap, and it's clearly just trying to affect the refs.
But in terms of, if that was Australia, there'd be barbs going backwards and forwards, left, right, and centre.
Mate, there'd be clown pictures flying.
But generally, but there was a lot of, there's still, this is the point I'm trying to make, there was still respect from Hansen to the Lions, and that's what I really enjoy.
And I'll tell you, ahead of the second test, one of the big factors I think is, I thought, we've had this chat so far about the game, we haven't mentioned the ref. I think Pepper did a pretty good job. That doesn't mean he got everything right, but I think he did a pretty good job.
None of them get it right. No.
But 2 French refs ahead who can be very different beasts. So, if that ruck gets reffed a little bit differently, and don't forget the Kiwis, they very much played that one-off game. At one point, they played blindside for about 5 minutes straight and just punched and punched and punched, and they got them punch drunk.
I think an Australian should be refereeing the next 2.
Yeah, Gardner. You reckon Gardner should do it?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, it's 2 French refs. That can be a big factor in the way the game goes. Could be lots to talk about there.
Yeah. It's all about man management, and there was one comment too on I got online. I can't remember who it was, but I was talking about Australian referee man management. So that's really improved, which is great to see.
Yep.
All right, so victory to the All Blacks, deservedly so, and great to see.
And Retallick man of the match for me.
Oh, Retallick, just enormous, a colossus. Not so big was the Wallabies win. Now, they were under the pump early, all over the place, diabolically dumb at some points, then accused of being unfit, but they still won the test 40 points to 27 against Italy. Benny, what were you, because I was at the races actually working, sending you tweets for the scores. What did you think about it?
Mate, it was what I expected, and that wasn't much, to be frank. Is it time for Australian rugby fans, is it time for us to recognise the days of us being a top 3 contender in the world are no longer? Is that where we are? It feels that way. Italy came down without a lot behind them to look back on with pride this year, maybe half against England where they pulled a nice dodgy tactic that I enjoyed. But Italy arrived without a lot going for them, and they took on an Australian side at home, which should have been 2 tests in, coming fired up after a loss to Scotland. And we said last week Scotland weren't mugs. It wasn't a disgrace to lose to Scotland, but it was not a great effort based on Scotland having 4 players out, being in Australia, etc., etc. This Italian side should have been smashed, and the game was in the balance for far too long because this team does not have their heads on straight. That was my interpretation. Their heads being on straight, not fitness.
Yeah, so I think the whole thing, you raised a really good point. You actually raised a good point a couple of weeks ago.
Someone write this down.
When you pulled out a few comments from Checker saying, oh, look, it's the AAU's in trouble, so, that's why no one turned up to watch the Wallabies play in Melbourne. Yeah. And we both agree that, well, that's rubbish. No one cares about what goes on there. If they want to see the Wallabies play in Melbourne, they should have packed the joint out. So, regardless. It's more about the fact that the Wallabies had a diabolical year the year before, and the game was on the nose. So that's one thing. I also believe here, Ben, that the fitness is a tactical ploy to push people away from what's really going on, and is that the Wallabies have no idea what they're doing.
2.5 years into his tenure, or 2 years into his tenure, it's fitness. That is misdirection, my friend. Even if fitness was an issue, if you're the Australian coach...
I think it has been in the past.
But say it has been, right? Why bring it up after the last game of a 3-test series and say after that game, oh, now it's fitness? I've got a question for you, right? You've worked inside the Wallabies camp. What does the Australian coach do for 6 months of the year?
All right, so the Australian coach goes around and will slightly annoy everyone else about they want to get their data. And in New Zealand, they do this all beautifully because it's built into one system. But here, sometimes what happens is they keep a little bit back. And what I mean by data is the fitness data on players and how they're going. So what's the obvious question here? The question is, if you prepare yourself for a Super Rugby game, if you're the Waratahs or the Reds or whatever, and get yourself loaded up to play a certain stretch of games, will you then not be fit to play Test rugby because you're preparing for a different set of physical challenges? If that were the case and Australia was suffering as a result, Ben, why did New Zealand do it so well? Why do New Zealand players look fit when they play for their Super Rugby team, and they also look like they're about to tear concrete off the walls or off the ground or wherever the concrete is, because they're so fit? Yeah. There is an issue. I think we aren't typically the fittest teams. But I can go all the way back to Steve Nance. Remember Steve Nance? Yeah. He got Australia fit. Yeah. That was the number one thing he had to do. And he documented stuff like never before. This is what I go back to.
So if he's worried about fitness, why are those concerns coming up after the 3rd test instead of 3 games into the Super Rugby season where he could have been publicly in their papers calling on the coaches to pull their fingers out and have a bigger crack? Now, I just want to read out what he said because I found it really interesting because I
Yeah.
think it goes to what we've said before about him.
Right. Is this checker watch, by the way?
This is Checker Watch in the middle of the Wallabies game analysis. We haven't even talked about the game that much. He said, if we want to play a game at the ruck and being powerful with not as much kicking, we need to improve our ability for repeat efforts. Fitness reflects in concentration, so 3 out of 5 passes becomes 5 out of 5. We have to up skills to play attacking rugby. Now, I'll give him skills, right? I'll give him skills, but he's not talking about skills. He's talking about fitness. 3 out of 5 passes becomes 5 out of 5. Fitness has nothing to do with the first pass of the game going astray and the knock-on straight from the kickoff, right? That can't be fitness, isn't fitness. That's attention. But he keeps talking about the game they want to play. The game they want to play. He believes Australian rugby is a game where you do nothing but run hard and throw passes and loop around each other the whole time, right?
Yeah.
I saw, actually, our mate Pato from the Telly wrote a good story on this last week where he said his vision of Australian running rugby doesn't have to be what it is. It doesn't have to be just running the ball. Every other team in the world adapts. This team doesn't adapt, and we have a coach who publicly says, I don't want to adapt. If you have to kick, you cannot play 80 minutes of running rugby. And
Just keep kicking to him the wing, as we said before, 9 times out of 10, then you play a backline move or decide to run it yourself if you're a fly half and catch them by surprise. And our checkers seem to indicate that that might be a boring way to play, just kicking it to Folau. I don't think I've seen anything more spectacular than Israel Folau leaping above everyone else because he's going to get the ball and becomes a challenge on its own. But you know what that's going to do? It's going to start to get the team to work out how to play winning rugby, and that's what they've got to start doing.
yeah,
Yes, you can beat Italy here at the end of their season, big deal. But they're a long way behind, not just the All Blacks, but South Africa as well.
yeah. And actually, one of our viewers, I didn't see who it was, made a good point before about Folau on the wing, saying when he goes out to the wing, you know the kick's coming. That's because he's going to be looking for action around the ball. But if he gets out there, you think, oh, hang on, here comes the cross.
So
kick
use it.
Folau.
Use it.
But Checker doesn't want to, and his comments say he doesn't want to.
I mean, use that psychology.
Ah, right.
So okay, we're expecting, no doubt they'll say if they kick to it, the opposition are saying, look, this Folau bloke's good in the air, so we're going to have to man up on him if they kick to him all the time. So, you know, you've got this amazing weapon, and they just don't know how to use him. Sure, he can play attacking rugby with the ball as well, but just vary it. I just don't see any tactics in the game. And there was a great moment in the Springbok game that we'll talk about, a centre winning the line-out ball later on. But, you know, they're doing stuff. Italy are doing stuff.
Right. I got an idea for you that I've ripped off one of our viewers. I always say, guys, the more you comment, the more it gets us thinking, and I've seen some good ideas. But before I get there, a couple of points to note for me in the game. Folau on fire, looking great, right? He is in good nick. First Wallabies player to score two or more tries in a game in 3 consecutive games. He's stopped his no-try Folau nickname. He's going very well. Genia went okay. Foley was kind of average. What I found interesting, though, is we talk about the Folau kick. We talked about fitness a while ago, and we're not the only ones here. This isn't brilliant stuff. There are people out there saying the same things, but Checker seems to be late to the party on some of this stuff. Something I thought the Wallabies did, and I found interesting, is they definitely committed to the ruck less. So there was less about getting over the ball, they weren't getting over the ball as much. They seemed to be not giving up on it, but thinking there's much more chance of us controlling the ruck. And this is what NZ and others like England have done. They've played on the ball less. And Cameron Wells, one of our Facebook viewers, we're having a chat on there about Sam Cane, because I believe Sam Cane in the All Blacks lineup, in the defensive line, is moving laterally like a prop. But he was saying they've bulked him up to about 110 kilos because, as Cameron was saying, the ABs have been more focused on winning the physical battle around the ruck at test level than winning the ball off the deck. Whereas for the first time I saw this Wallabies team thinking less about winning the ball off the deck and more about winning the ball in the ruck area. So are they slowly getting where others are already? And similar to that, that's why they're saying Artie Sevilla, they might want to bulk him up some more because they want that power around the ruck, more than hands on the ball. Yeah,
good point, Ben. But this is the thing that annoys me. So we're supposed to be a lot smarter than that. We shouldn't be coming from 5 yards behind. We should be actually trying to be in front. Like, you can't be good enough to think, okay, this is what the All Blacks are doing this year. This is what England's doing this year. Let's try and match them. We've got to be thinking about the steps ahead of them. And I've been in those meetings with Rob McQueen, Eddie Jones before in the past where this has been discussed. It's not good enough, even from a media management point of view, of being where we were last year or equalising with someone next year. We've got to try and leap that. So we're not sitting there and working out with our brains how to attack the game on the field and tactically.
Yes. And tactically is a good point because we talked about selection. We thought Gatland and Hansen both did good at the selection table. We think Cheika struggles there, and I think it shows. I think
except for 1 point, and I'll wear this one. But Carmichael Hunt, to me, has been a success story.
He has, but I think that's his attitude. He's clearly a guy who just doesn't give up, and that's what you want to see from more of them.
Yeah, but to still give him credit for picking him. Yeah,
true. But he's also
well,
playing.
we were sitting here being critical of that.
Yeah,
and I think
you're
he's
right.
a guy
He's
who's
done more
got
than
heart,
we thought he would.
He's got heart, and he's got the ability to hit a ball outside.
Yeah,
So the league is taking credit for the fact that he was passing the ball.
But see, he was never a 5'8".
No.
So, but all of a sudden
he should be.
He's at first receiver a few times, which is a nice change, and he threw a nice left to right pass a couple of times. But it's an interesting one, right? Because you feel like that's the spot that's been promised to Beale as well when he comes back, that he's going to be playing the 12.
Yeah, we'll see you in 10 soon.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
But to the two Cheika selections, I thought Rob Horne was an example of the way he gets beaten at the selection table. He's not adventurous at the selection table very often. He'll bring young blokes and stick them on the bench, but Genia was on there the whole time. Powell barely got on the field when Genia has been average for a game and 3/4.
Yeah.
So why didn't Powell get on there earlier? Have a crack. Similarly, Rob Horne, solid defensive player, not doing a lot elsewhere, and didn't have another great game. Where are the guys who might have had a chance in there that, a couple of guys from the Rebels, the Tom Englishes of the world, or Billy Meeks, change your centre combination up there. And I want to talk to Tuxter27 on YouTube, put this one in my head, and I love it. DHP to fly half. Dane Hallett-Petty to fly half. I don't mind that as an idea.
All
right?
Yep.
Because we need something more. I think we need more.
They're definitely,
a fly half with a pass, a boot, who can read a game.
The boot's killing us.
The boot is killing
and I
us.
don't think you can make you could probably give, well, we had the Chris Lathams and Mark Gerards in the past with big booming boots for the Wallabies, but you still have to have your fly half's got to be able to kick.
Yeah.
He has to be able to kick.
Yep, and we can't.
And it's just it's killing us. And I think you're right in selection in a certain way. But what the big issue for me is that all these teams, South Africa, All Blacks, England, has spent this June period building for the rest of the year, right? Yeah. And of course, they'll go back and play club football and resume their test series later in autumn in the Northern Hemisphere. But in terms of the Southern Hemisphere, what has Australia done? So if we come out with an entirely new backline to face other teams like New Zealand...
What have we learnt in these last 3 tests?
We have wasted 2 years of development.
Yeah.
So what does that tell you? Why can't... That's why old mate, who put the diatribe on and went viral to Cheika, deserved an answer.
Yeah.
And this is where when a guy gets the job and there is no other option... and he can do whatever he wants. And when the CEO's under the pump, when the board's under the pump and thinks everything's going fine, that's when the coach just do what he wants.
Yeah.
There's no one asking the questions. There's no one above him in an HBU capacity, like a Nusafora would have been in the past.
Yeah.
Who can say, well, what are you doing here, mate?
Yeah.
Jeff Miller used to do that.
Yep.
And it was a really good structure. If you're wondering what's happened in Australian rugby, that's what we've lost. Because the head coach of Australian rugby hasn't got someone with the rugby brains above him. Forget the board; they haven't got an idea. But no one in a high performance unit that's as sharp as a Jeff Miller or David Nusafora.
Yeah. Now, I just want to say, Lawrence has just made a point that I agree with. Because if not DHP to 5'8", play him at fullback, and the same way that that AB switched that 10 and 15, rotating with Foley. Right?
Yeah,
get him in that front line, get him back,
mate.
get him in that front line, and have a crack at something different. Something different.
Yeah, but I agree, mate. But we've wasted 3 test matches to do that.
Yeah,
that's the big problem I have. So we continually do that, and by the time we get there, we'll be experimenting again and be brave against New Zealand and lose another Bledisloe Cup.
Now, mate, before you go to the South Africa game,
Yep.
one more point. I think Cheika's copped a bit of flack for saying, laugh at me if you want, but we can beat the ABs. He can't say anything else. I got no problems with him saying that. He has to be out the front saying we're here to win rugby.
Yeah.
So leave him alone on that one. He's wrong for mine.
Yeah.
I'd love to see them beat them, but right now we're looking at 40-point drubbings.
Yeah.
We really are. We are looking like the number 5-6 team in the world, and the All Blacks are looking in great nick.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually look like the team we are in the world rankings. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
All right, so Benny, great weekend. Stayed up and watched the the Springboks in France playing the 3rd test. A couple of more changes to the Springboks. I'd like to see them, but they were forced in their hand a little bit there. Tight first half. It was a very scrappy game at times, but you know what? South Africa beats France And I know France are at the end of this season, all that sort of stuff. But if France came here, they would have trounced Australia, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But what they did was perform brilliantly. South Africa to win 3-0 and really pump the team up. 55,000 at Ellis Park.
Yeah.
That's a great crowd, you know, because a few of these games over there have had abysmal, especially at Super Rugby, attendances. So that's really great to see. It's great for the World Game. The World Game is still heaving and working really well around the globe. It's just over here in this neck of the woods, it's not doing that well. But South Africa, well done. 3-0 series win.
A lot to like, and 3 clear wins, okay, about 20 points each game. And that is exactly what you would have wanted to see from Australia. South Africa have had what would for them is a perfect little June test series, right? 3 games against quality opposition where they've shown they've got cohesion, they're getting the team together, the team's feeling good about themselves, they're looking sharp. They're not quite, you say knock over the All Blacks yet, but they're heading in the right direction. They've got something to build on. And particularly, I think you can see that their headspace is right.
Yes.
These are the same players, talk about fitness, who were playing against other Australian teams in Super Rugby and
Mate,
going
they're jumping
head to
all
head.
over each other, they're backslapping.
It's their headspace.
Kissing each other.
And
That's
the
always a good
tactics, right?
sign.
I mean, compare Checker to Coetzee.
Yeah.
Coetzee was more chance of being shot than Checker last year of saying, you're out, son. And all of a sudden, he's looking a million.
Yeah, you know what? Selection.
Yeah.
Selection's been really important. And he sort of pulled his head in a bit too with some of his comments.
Well, he's probably been less arrogant. He's probably, thought he's less about himself, and he's got a good team around him now. I think
That's
a better
the key.
team.
I think the team's doing a great job.
Yeah.
In the start of the second half, you've got to have a look. Just early in the second half, the Boks took a line out, and they stacked the line out, and Serfontein, who's a centre, as we all know, won the line out and gave it to Etzebeth, and he scored the try. That was fantastic play. It was just, and then the reaction to it afterwards was one of like, we're not bad. We could do something here.
Where are the Wallabies doing something different? They are so predictable in the game they want to play.
Yeah.
One other point about South Africa, though, I think the mistake Coetzee made, or I thought it was a mistake. I read some of this in the South African press, and I hardly agreed. When Whiteley went out, they picked Etzebeth as captain. Etzebeth is your rough nut hard man. He's not a captain. Kolisi should have been the captain. Out of the Stormers. I'm a massive fan of his, so I think that was a missed opportunity.
Yeah, although I do love watching him play.
Oh, yeah, no question about that. I'm just talking about captaincy, right? Given the right bloke the captaincy. But
right. Anyway, they've got. I reckon they've got choices there, and a lot more than they have over here.
Well, we said last year, we said they've got players.
Yeah.
They just got to pull it together right.
Yeah, they have. I always knew that, and it looks like they've just got everyone together now. And there's some moments. France were really awkward to play against. They sort of remind me of Scotland when it's a lot of chaos, but they are in your face. They're rushing up, not just from just wide of the ruck, but around the pillars. They are absolute pain, reaching onto the footy at any moment, and they are difficult to play. They were hard to play against. So that wasn't an easy Test series win to South Africa.
Yep.
All right. Viewer comments. What have you got for us?
Just before we do, can I make a couple of very quick points about stories I read this week?
Yep.
I forgot to put these on the list. Brendan Cano, the great cannon shot, he wrote a piece in the Daily Telegraph.
Didn't he fire one away there?
He did. He wrote a piece that said the 5 things Australian rugby needs to do, and it was bang on. Cano does not miss. He gets stuck in. And it was basically new leadership, i.e. Pulver has to say now that he's heading out. External search, bring in fresh blood to run the joint. An independent review, get people who aren't tried and true blazer-wearing rugby types to work out what's going on. Unify and centralise with tough love. That means you can't sort everyone out, so just pull it together, make it happen. And re-engage with the grassroots. And he had a couple of great ideas. Wallabies should all have to play 1 club rugby game a year, regardless. They've got to find a way to make it happen. And every rugby jersey in Australia to get the Aussie badge sewn on it. I thought that was great.
Yeah,
it's a great idea. But
great
I thought, just want to shout out for Cano's story in the Daily Telegraph. Google it if you haven't seen it, or get on the site and read it because it was a cracker.
Yeah, he's a guy who has a go. So I think we're going to have him in August back on the program. So
for the Rugby Championship.
Yeah, so we'll be able to get him to fire off another shot for us. All right, so been seeing on the boards, YouTube, Twitter, and of course Facebook. Plenty of great comments. Benny, what about some strike comments of the week?
Strike comments, I just want to read a couple out, but guys, always please, we love it when you like and comment, but particularly share. If you can share the show out into other Facebook groups you're a part of, other rugby fans get to know us, it helps us out, so that'd be great if you could do it. Viewer comments of the week. On Facebook, I want to shout out to Brendan Elks, who wrote a great piece just after the game, the Lions AB's game, describing Retallick as a horrific wall of knees, elbows, forehead, chin. It was a great post, Brendan. Stephen Baxter on the Kahoo group, who was sharing us out there and giving us a big shout out for being independent. We always like to make sure that we tell it as it is, not through the green and gold glasses. Ed Logue, who's another regular. Tactics, running rugby, no kicking game, got stuck into the Wallabies on our site, and absolutely was spot on, Ed. And this is in YouTube. Tony Atkins, an old mate of ours on YouTube. Beyond Disaster Relief NZ, he asked for a shout out for his charitable trust. He's doing did some work in Christchurch, and he's been in Vanuatu recently. And the last one, Noel Leem, who gave us a rap. So you might always get a mention if you give us a rap. Noel gave us a massive rap on YouTube, so thank you, Noel.
Oh yeah, Noel, I read that. That's just terrific. Thank you very much. It was quite a yes. I was pretty touched by that actually. It was fantastic and great to see people taking note. Now, there's one thing I have to do. I promised this to our man who gets more mentions than anyone else, more than Checker, Darren Ormsby. So apparently Michael Bell has got a spare ticket for the Auckland Test. I think it was, Billy. Let me just pull this up. Benny, can you just talk for a second while I bring this up?
I was just going to say, I'm looking forward to getting it. So in the after show, we get in the comments. Guys, if you're still there, give us a thumbs up now. We always like to know that you're out there. So click your thumbs up so we know that you're there. But I've seen Rob Martin saying people are commenting well. The quality of comments we get on our show and on our Facebook page and on our website are top notch. So guys, we really do appreciate that. And as you saw tonight, that's what makes us think about what we want to talk about, and it makes us think about different things.
All right. Thanks, Benny, for filling in there. So this is basically a community announcement. But Michael Bell, who's a legend of club rugby in Sydney, has a spare ticket, A category. So they're $449. So this is like, the same price you'd pay for it if you bought it. It's come free. Darren Ormsby can't take it, so if you can get in contact, if you know the guys, Darren Ormsby or Michael Bell.
We're resellers now, are we? What's going on?
So it's just there's a spare ticket there, mate. So we're just helping out. So that's for the third test, the Lions series.
Cool.
All right, we'll get to the after show in a second. If you're on YouTube, of course, and you want to see us live, for the moment at least, you'll have to come across here to Facebook and make some comments, but just hang out there, man. We will get
live there one day.
Yeah, we'll get live there. I've got a couple more computers here ready to rock and roll. But yeah, so there's a spare ticket there for anyone who wants to. I think the only problem is you have to sit next to Michael Bell. No, he's a good fella. All right, thanks for coming in, mate. What's your tip for Test 2?
All Blacks.
Yeah. All right.
It's a mountain to climb for the Lions, but they've shown a fair bit of ticker, so I hope we see more.
All right, okay. There is Ben Kimber. Thanks for joining us on episode 243. And as I say, every week, enjoy your rugby. And let's see. I think the All Blacks again in the second test, but who knows? Let's see if the Lions can lift